The Dalai Lama has said, if you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion. When you hear the word compassion, what do you think of? What do you feel? What do you remember? Maybe it's something abstract, a concept, a definition. Maybe it's a comforting emotion. Maybe it's a person or a pet. Compassion has been extended or received. Nearly all of what I share in these video segments is research-based, with most of the sources being contemporary peer-reviewed journal articles and books by experts, perhaps some spiritual leaders like the Dalai Lama and creative writers included as well. For instance, Mayo Clinic's Dr. Amit Sud in his book, The Mayo Clinic Guide to Stress-Free Living. There's also an article, Definition of Compassion in Healthcare, a systematic literature review. And this big recent book, the Oxford Handbook of Compassion Science. And a book by the Buddhist Thich Nhat Hanh, No Mud, No Lotus. A common evidence-based stable definition will help us. It can serve as a tool. Compassion arises in response to suffering, and that's what makes it so unique, so important. We all suffer. No one wants to suffer alone, or unjustly, or simply too much. I propose we think about compassion as having three parts. Sympathy, which has to do with the intellectual understanding of suffering. One might think of a diagnosis. One might look at the evidence based upon a scan or a test, or another person's account, a rating on a scale. There can be physical and emotional suffering, past and present traumas. We can understand those. And then there's empathy, feeling an emotional resonance with the one suffering. Contemporary neuroscience is discovering mirror neurons in the brain that fire when we have this resonance with another. We're so engaged emotionally. Some might call it a kind of emotional intelligence that can be cultivated. Those two are not the same, an intellectual understanding and an empathetic understanding. And then the will arising to alleviate the suffering. That which drives us toward action. And action may be the conclusion in this process. It may be considered optional, but one often feels that sense of will arising. The Judeo-Christian story of the Good Samaritan is an example, going out of one's way to alleviate the suffering of another, total stranger. Compassion is not merely kindness. Kindness can be important, is often important in alleviating of suffering. And generosity is not the same as compassion, though generosity can be used to help alleviate the suffering in others. Keeping things distinct, our concepts, our values, our virtues, is important in this understanding of compassion. And compassion is not merely pity. Pity tends to be hierarchical, a perspective taking, where one looks down on pitiable others. Pity might even be evasive or dismissive. Compassion asks us to engage, to value the dignity of others. And it takes strength. It takes courage. As the Buddhist teacher Joan Halifax has said, compassion has a strong back and a soft front. Anyone who simply thinks that compassion is weak or that compassion is based only on emotion is wrong in terms of contemporary research and literature. From an article by Strauss and others in Clinical Psychology Review from 2016, they conduct an extensive literature review, and they identify 5 parts to compassion. I'd like you to think about these. 1 is recognizing suffering in others. 2 is understanding the common humanity of suffering. 3 is feeling emotionally connected with the person who is suffering. 4 is tolerating difficult feelings that may arise. 5, acting or being motivated to act to alleviate the suffering. We can simplify down to 3 again, and I use an article from 2004 by Kanov and others. They distill the definition to noticing, feeling, and responding to suffering. It's one of the most useful definitions I've found, evidence-based and practical. I use it as a kind of tool. I encourage you to do so as well. But I suspect that you are already skilled in noticing, feeling, and responding to suffering.